All right, I want to thank Tim Gago, Ricky Davis, Sean Ryan, Sheol, Wong Jinstein for the GoFundMe donations. Thank you guys so much. You've been added to the raffle. I'm giving away a free pocket butthole, free signed books, free merchandise, signed ibuprofen, which are limited to 800. After 800, I'm not going to send any more. I want to have all the merchandise be like that, only 800. So, and there's new merchandise up, links below. That definitely helps me too. But let's get into the story. This is my 5 years in federal prison, part 12. And when we left off last time, I just got in my first fight. I'm at this rough, medium security prison in, San Bernardino County, Victorville. It's in Adelanto, California. Horrible place. Horrible, horrible place. And I got in my first fight. I was already doing drugs there, but now I'm starting to get really in debt. And remember, I'd brought push and pull syringes up my ass into this prison, and I had basically handed it over to the dude that was running it for the whites at that time and say, hey, this is from Boots, from San Pedro, and I'm blessing you with this. And so pretty much what that did is it got me hooked up with all the dope fiends. Not everybody in prison is a dope fiend, contrary to popular belief. There's like an entire group of people that look down on drug use. There's actually skinheads that believe in the white supremacy thing to the point where they don't use drugs and they look down on people that do. And I found that in the black culture and in the Hispanic culture, a lot of times guys sell drugs and they look at a drug addict, a hype, dope fiend, the same way that a prostitute looks at a John. Basically, if you're the dope fiend, you're the sucker, and they're there to make the money. So not everybody's a dope fiend. There's definitely a lot of dope fiends in prison, don't get me wrong. That's what I was. And if I fit in any way, it was two things. It was because I was a dope fiend, and that's like a universal language that if you're like a true bottom-of-the-barrel junkie, you recognize another true bottom-of-the-barrel junkie. And I was also funny. I would say off-the-wall stuff. And I think that saved me from getting my ass kicked and getting killed. Because some people kind of adopt me as their bigger brother because they thought I was just kind of like a silly, outlandish kid. And, sometimes it's hard to hurt somebody that's like that. And I think that it helped me navigate through the system for as long as I did without having to roll it up or check in, whatever you want to PC up. I didn't have to do that in the feds because I had people sending me money, not just my parents. I also had friends that were looking out for me. And I think that my personality, I made a joke out of everything, I'd like just go up to like the toughest dude on the yard and be like, hey man, have you ever been butt fucked so hard that you hallucinate? And they'd be like, oh man, you're funny. I'm not going to kill you now. I'm like, all right, cool. And like I fit in with people because of my sense of humor, I think. Well, who knows? Maybe I'm just delusional. I've been to prison 3 times. What the fuck do I know? Not everything that I say is correct or true. It's just how I think. And prison's very predatory. I mean, at this point, they knew that I'm going to store $320, which is like the most you can go. They're seeing that I have the ability to jump on the phone, call my parents, call a friend. Hey, send 200 here, send this there, send that there. And once they see that you have the money, they go after you because they're vultures. It's very predatory. So people could just come up to me and hand me, they'd be like, hey, open your hand. Just hand me a gram. $400 gram. And I'd be like, hey, how do you want it? Do you want me to suck your dick? No. Do you want me to have my parents put it on your books? Do you want me to have this friend do this? You want Green Dot? You want PayPal? Do you want Western Union, MoneyGram? Do you want to do it in commissary? And they'd just be like, oh no, man, just take care of it when you can, bro. We trust you. And I didn't realize, my naivety didn't let me see that I was falling into a trap. And I'm sure people are like, well, why do people just extend people credit in prison if it's a liability, because they can just go up to the cops at any time and be like, oh, I'm not safe, and then go away, and then the person that they owe the money to gets burned. At this prison, the reason the credit lines were so massive at that time is that the whites ran a gambling ticket. So a gambling ticket's like, point spreads. Say like Baltimore's playing San Francisco. Baltimore's catching 3 points. That's what like the Vegas spread would say, right? Well, these guys that run these tickets, they tweak the spread a little bit. So they'll say, well, instead of catching 3, they catch 6 points. And those Vegas algorithms are so accurate anyway. If you tweak them out a few points like that, it's almost impossible to lose if you're the house. So there'd be independent people that would run sports tickets, but also the whites, just as a race, had a sports ticket, and it was the biggest sports ticket on the entire compound. In the feds, a yard is called a compound, and I think it was called Moneyline. And they would run sports tickets. They'd have runners in each building, and you could like do bets. I think 5 stamps was the minimum. Remember, everything's in stamps. And then they'd make huge amounts of money. I mean, I know people that were running tickets, and they were literally sending their family like $3,000 or $4,000 street money a week, because people would get in debts, or they would collect stamps, and they'd sell the stamps for street money, or people would pay it off that way. It was crazy. And the reason that the whites had a ticket was to cover debts if somebody rolled it up or checked in, which means going up to the cop and be like, I gotta go, I'm a bitch. Which is a bitch move, you know, to burn somebody like that in prison. I can see how, like, I mean, look, if I wasn't fortunate and had resources, had my family bailing me out of stuff, I'm sure I would have pulled some bitch move like that myself, just because once you start getting strung out on drugs, impulsivity takes over, and you just completely like lose any sense of morale. You lose any sense of what's right and wrong. Your conscience just gets skewed with the addiction. And so I saw it happen all the time. I mean, there was like professional check-in artists, right? Like guys would get off the bus and they'd be like, man, I got so much guap, man. Shit, I'm chilling. They'd have like a photo album. They'd be like, check out this Porsche. Oh, there's me in Dubai. Dude, look at this supermodel I've been fucking, dude. I'm ball. Oh, yeah. Let me get those exclusive sunglasses for $300. Cool. Then they'd have the sunglasses on. Hey, man, let me buy that weed. Let me get that. Yeah, let me get that. Let me get a gram of heroin. Let me get this. Woo, they're smoking weed over there on partying. Yeah, dude, my money's going to be here next week, man. My girl's going to send. I'm getting like $3,000 on my books. I got you. And then, boom. Gone. Happened all the time. Speaking of which, and sometimes it would affect me personally. Now, there was a guy named Jamie Lake, and he had a pretty fucked up story. This is what happened with Jamie Lake. He was a meth dealer. He lived in, I want to say, upstate Washington somewhere. And he was a big meth dealer, and then he had a kid, and he turned his life around. And he started a construction company, and he like used the illicit money that he made from selling meth to starting a construction company. And 5 years goes by, making a ton of money, he's being a good dad, turned his life around. One day the DEA knocks on his door, and they arrest him because he had been indicted for conspiracy to distribute meth for activities that had happened 5 years before. And the way that they had gotten him was there was a number of Western unions that had occurred during that time. He was paying like his runners. Like he'd be sending thousands of dollars on the wire. You should never do that. You should never leave a paper trail, right? But he had done that. And they indicted him for conspiracy to distribute meth. And I think he got 14 years in prison, I want to say. 14 years, maybe it was 10 years, I don't know. It was a significant number. They have 7 years to file on you. So if you're out there selling drugs right now, just keep in mind that you can get indicted up to 7 years later for stuff you're doing today. Just because like people think that they can make some moves, stack some chips, and then get out of it clean. Feds are dirty, man. They'll indict you up to 7 years later, and that's what happened to this guy. And he had to turn himself into Victorville. And for somebody that had been in such a bad situation, I liked him right away. He was like a cool guy. He wasn't a heroin addict or anything, but he had a ton of money because he turned himself in. He owned this successful business, and he started buying everything when we were buying. Him and I were probably smoking $100 worth of rolled cigarettes a day collectively. And we do meth here and there when it came in, and because that was like his thing. But then he started doing heroin with me. And a lot of times that's how it would work. I'd find someone else that had money, and I'd be like, all right, I'll get us for right now. When's your money coming? And we kind of like make a group effort to stay strung out together. And that's what happened with this guy. And every day we would get high on heroin, we'd smoke cigarettes, and we would just walk the yard all day. And, remember, I don't know if I have HIV or not. I'm still thinking that Diablo may have given it to me. And I'm just like on zero fucks given time right now. Just living for the moment, just getting loaded and trying not to think about the predicament that I'm in. My debts are getting increasingly harder to get out of, and I'm getting avalanched. And I'm having to come up with ways to kind of, scam these dudes that I owe money to. I had owed all this money for heroin, and I didn't have enough, and I had gotten the Stamp Collector's Almanac, and I got it off that time. And then it kind of surfaced later that there were fake stamps, but they couldn't trace it back to me, so that's how that happened. But with the, because I mentioned that in an earlier video, and I give like a resolution of what happened, it worked. I was able to double my stamp count, but there was like a blip on the radar that there was something foul going on, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. I like barely escaped just on that incident. And everyone was encouraging me to go to medical because they were, I'm extroverted. You hear me all the time. I'm like, I have a small dick. I have herpes. I have hep C. Like I say whatever's on my mind, I say. So people are always like, you're high on your videos. It's like, motherfucker, I would just tell you. I don't even care what you think. I'm not high. I'm on parole, and I get randomly tested. He comes to my house and tests me. I'm cool, man. Being a good dad's important to me, and I'm not doing drugs. But, I was pulling dope fiend stuff like that, like doubling my stamp supply. And then Jamie came in right around that time, and like some of my financial woes were quelled for a little bit because he had money. So we're like on this epic run together, and his money's good. Like it's landing all the time. He just calls his grandma, and she has like a stack of his cash, and he's Grandma, I need you to send here. Boom. Everything's taken care of. And he comes up to me one day while we're in the middle of a run. This is like 4 months, right? So now a bunch of time has gone by. And he goes, Leone, man, I'm in a bad situation, man. And, I owe the Southsider, and I don't know when I can pay him. I'm like, well, what's up with your money? And he's like, I don't know. My grandma's saying that I'm spending too much and that like I need to chill out, but I owe this guy a lot of money. I'm like, well, how much? He's like, $1,500. I'm like, fuck, that is a lot. He's like, that's your friend, right? And it wasn't my friend. It was a Southsider that was getting dope off of a lot. He's like, can you go up to this guy and can you vouch for me? And I'm like, generally I don't like to do that, but this was like my friend. And I went up to the Southsider and I said, hey, dude, Jamie's money's good. I've been running with this dude for a few months, and I think that, I don't think I'm vouching for him. That's what I said. I'm like vouching for this guy. He was like, are you sure? Are you sure, Pedro? I'm like, yes, of course. And he's like, okay, if he checks in, anything like that, even though the whites would cover it, if like he goes to them, like now this debt was going to be on me. That night, it's like the end of night yard, and we're walking back. So you have to walk like across the compound, and there's like these metal detectors, and then the housing units are beyond that. He lived in, I think, A upper, and I lived in C lower. So we get past the metal detectors, and he has to go his way, I have to go my way. And Jamie's like, he's like, all right, man, I'm gonna check in tonight. I'm not gonna see you again. Thanks for vouching for me. And we joked about that all the time. It was gay humor, and it was checking humor. We'd always say that. I'd be like, hey, can you front this to me? I'll check in tomorrow. Like whatever we were saying, we made a joke out of checking in. It's like a big thing. But for whatever reason, I knew that when he said that, he was serious. And I looked at him, I'm just like, and he just kept going to his unit. I'm like, fuck, I hope he doesn't check in. Then the 1,500's on me. The next morning, I go to the chow hall at breakfast, and it's like the talk of the town. All the white guys are like, you hear about that bitch, Jamie Lake, man? Checked in like a bitch. I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? Everyone's like, what? I'm like, I vouched for that guy for 1,500. They're like, you're an idiot. Why would you do that? And that was just me trying to be nice and I knew what it was like to have pressure, because now I'm having my own pressure. So now on top of the debts that I have I have to cover this guy's 1,500, and it's horrible. Now, what I did have going for me is that the guy that was running the yard was a guy named Bear, and he was from Southern California somewhere, big Italian guy named Bear. And for whatever reason, he thought that I was funny. And we were like, usually the guy that was running it before that was a guy named Travis, this guy from Iowa. And he was just like, he looked at me, and look, I don't blame these guys at all. Usually guys that run federal prison yards that I was at, especially the rougher ones, when I first started doing time, they looked at me as a liability because I was, I didn't know, I wasn't hip to the politics. I didn't know like what I was supposed to do, and I was constantly running up debts, and I was constantly putting myself in precarious situations like the one that I just told you about where I vouched for Jamie. I had no business doing that. So usually like the guy that was running the yard didn't like me, whoever it was. It's not that they didn't like me, it's just that they just didn't really associate with me. I was like, the junkie kid, and I wasn't that cool. My Sublime line stopped working. Hey, my Ruka died, fool. It's like, why are you talking like that, bro? You're white, And I'm like, oh, man, I should only be talking like that to Southsiders. But I did befriend this guy, Bear, and he liked me. And he was like a level-headed dude. I was getting in debts that I couldn't pay at this point. And I always did the I got you. I'd be like walking across the compound and like I'd see a pice that I owe money to, and he's like, hey, what's up? And I'm just like, I got you. I wouldn't say when, just I got you. And that's the ultimate spin line. It worked every time, because if you say you don't have the money, then they'll want to kill you, or they'll want to get you hurt by your own race. But if you say I got you and you just put your finger up, then it just keeps kind of spinning them. I was like a master spin artist in there. And so like I'm like knowing that if I go to the library on Tuesday, I'm gonna run into Poncho, and if I run into, if I go to this AA meeting on Thursday night, I might see so and so. And I owed everybody and their mother money at this prison at the time. And Bear would have just like brotherly talks with me. We'd walk the track. Like some of these guys, I swear to God, that you'd think that they were like some mafioso you know what I'm trying to say? Mispronounced it. You would think some of these guys are like that. Like, seriously, I wouldn't be surprised if they would stick their hand out and someone would like kiss it softly, because that's how some of these people are just, they put up on a pedestal. And the reality is they're like probably tweakers living in a bush outside of prison, but then they come to prison and there's some sort of shot caller. It's just the irony in that. It was always funny to me. But anyway, what happened is Bear actually, a couple people like got smashed off the yard or whatever, and there's a couple violent incidents. In SIS, the Internal Investigative Unit for federal prisons, it's like the little detective squad, goon squad in the state, SIS and federal prison. Whenever violence goes on, race, when it's within your own camp, like when it's white guys jumping a white guy, they know that that's going to happen, but they also know that there's somebody calling the shots. So eventually, if too many incidents occur too quickly, or if the incidents are severe enough, SIS will just ship the guy running the yard, because they'll deem him the problem. And this happened to Bear. They locked him up in the hole under investigation, and then they were going to ship him. As soon as that happened, I'm just like, oh my God. The one thing that's really saving me is that guy likes me. So I was freaking out. And around that time, this kid had come in named DC Mike. He was like maybe my age, 23, 24, 25, something like that. And he was in the feds because he had hit somebody with a baseball bat outside of like a parking lot at a bar. Now, he's from Washington, D.C., which isn't its own state. It's like a providence. And what happens if you get busted in Washington, D.C., you go to federal prison. It's just like if you got busted on like a Indian reservation. There's a lot of Native Americans. There are people that got busted on like military bases, Indian reservations, or in Washington, D.C. And in fact, the D.C. blacks, the black guys from Washington, D.C. are notorious prison gang that are always going to war with their Aryan Brotherhood, and they're like really known for bad stuff, rapes and all sorts of weird perverted stuff. DC blacks have a terrible reputation, and they're greenlit. They're in the hat in a lot of prisons in the feds, and they're also like, there's certain yards they can't walk on, et cetera, et cetera. But this kid was white, DC Mike, and him and I became friends, but I pulled some bullshit moves on him. Like, I remember on New Year's, he wanted some heroin, and he had some books of stamps. And he's like, can you get it in your unit? I was like, yeah, because I guess it was dry in his unit. So he gave me the book of stamps, and I was supposed to go after dinner back to my unit, score the heroin, and then bring the heroin back out on the next move. And what ended up happening is they did like a yard recall where there wasn't another move. Sometimes that happens unexpectedly, and that happened this particular night. And what I did, just being naive, green, not knowing like what you can and can't do in prison, I went back to my unit, and because I couldn't leave again, I just spent his stamps on heroin and did it myself, thinking in my head that I could reimburse him like the next day. And I wasn't able to get the stamps the next day. So I showed up at lunch to see him. He's like, what's up, man? You got my stamps, or do you got some dope for me? And I'm like, hey, man, I did it. And I remember he looked at me. He's like, dude, it's not cool, man. You're doing power moves with my stamps. I'm like, power moves? It's fucking $15 worth of stamps. Power moves? Are you serious? But he was really pissed off. But we ended up making up. I made it right. I think I got like a gram like a couple days later, and I like split that shit in half with him just to make it right with him. And he was happy. So it ended up turning out okay. Now this kid was hot-headed. He was like best friends with Bear. So when Bear went to the hole, Mike decided to go to the hole on purpose and bring him some black, some heroin. I think it was that. He brought him something. But what Mike did is he got drunk on purpose, and he went up to a cop and just started talking shit to him, like out on the yard. Or, like when he was walking to the yard, the cop was tending the metal detector, and he's just like, fuck you. Boom, gets arrested, goes to the hole, and then Bear and him celled up together. So while he's in the hole with Bear, it gets kind of there's nobody running the yard. Nobody wants the job because everybody keeps getting shipped, or bad things keep happening to the yard reps. So it was kind of like we didn't have a rep for that time, and it was kind of undecided. We were waiting to get word from Bear or from a kite or something saying who he's giving the yard to. And what they decided is that the yard would be, the responsibility for who was running the yard would be delegated to 3 different people. Ed, that guy that I posted a picture of that was my unit rep, was one of them, and there were 2 other guys. Whole concept with that is now SIS isn't going to ship 3 people, even though there's no reason that they wouldn't do that. But that was like the whole idea behind it, that 3 people would have to make unanimous decisions. Instead of one person being the scapegoat, it would be divided between 3 people. So that's what happened while Bear was in the hole. And I'm freaking out because I owe money, and I'm starting to get a lot of heat, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't have Bear to basically like let me slide on this anymore. Now it's these 3 guys. I have to go to this like committee. It was like Captain Planet, with our powers combined. It was like that kind of shit. I said that to them one time, like on the yard. I like went up to them. I was like, with our powers combined, trying to make a Captain Planet joke, and they just all kind of like looked at me like, dude, that you're a lame. And so anyway, DC Mike ends up getting out of the hole, and he brings a kite from Bear. Now, we were all waiting for that to see what he wanted to do. So usually that's what happens. Someone will get shipped, but while they're waiting to get shipped, they'll be in the hole. They'll write a kite with instructions with what to do with the yard. And he wrote in the kite that he wanted DC Mike to take control of the yard. DC Mike, like I said, was a hot-headed kid. The guys that were running the yard now, these 3 guys, the Captain Planet power team, they're like, there's no way we're giving the yard to this kid. He's hot-headed. He's always getting in fights. I saw Mike do some pretty gnarly shit. Mike was pretty hardcore dude, even though he was my age. I mean, he was like a thin, maybe like 6 foot tall guy, but he was with it, And so he comes out with this kite, and he's like, look, they want to give me the yard. And they're like, no. Now, Mike's all pissed off about that. So what he does is he starts going out to the yard and politicking, just pretending, like just acting as if he doesn't care what they're saying. He's like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to run the yard. So he starts like politicking with the blacks and with the Pisces and with the Southsiders, like basically being like, yeah, this is my yard, like, you know, politicking. So they make a decision to remove him and smash him off the yard. This is one of the cooler things that I saw while I was in prison. And he was very popular. And remember, I always talk about it's a favoritism thing. It's a popularity contest. If you're like popular, then you usually get a pass. If you're a loner, you usually get a knife stuck in your back, or you get 4 21-year-olds stomping you out with steel toe boots. The reality of prison. Totally fake bullshit culture. So it was like a mandatory yard night, and they told Mike, see, nobody knew, like Mike didn't know this was coming. All the white guys are out there, and everybody surrounds Mike. And you can tell, like, he has this look of concern, but he's also mad, you know, and everyone's surrounding him, and they're like, Mike, we've come to a group decision. You got to go check in. You're either going to go voluntarily, or we're going to smash you off the yard. And that's it. He's like, check in. He's like, there's no way I'm doing that. I'm not going to PC up. I'm not going to ruin my proverbial, you know, convict career just because because you guys are telling me to. You're going to make me. Now, as he says this, everybody starts closing in on him. I'm kind of like standing off in the distance watching. Mike's my friend, but there's nothing I can do in this situation. You got 300-400 white guys surrounding him in this huge circle. And, you know, Mike's like, I'm not checking in. He's almost in tears. You know, it's just he's being emotional, but not in like a wimpy way. He's just like, he's genuinely hurt that they want him to check in. He's like, I don't want to do it. They're like, Mike, we love you, bro, but you got to go, man. He's like, then what? It's going to follow me, and I'm going to get fucked off at some other prison that I go to. Dude, why are you doing this to me? Like, Mike. And then you hear on the PA, it goes, yard, one-way movement back to the housing unit. And they're like, that's the movement, Mike. Just go. Now, the housing unit was, let me get a piece of paper. Housing unit was, it's not, I can't do it. So just imagine, like, the housing unit's like way in the distance, and you leave the yard and you have to make a left to go to the lieutenant's office. That's where you would check in. That's also where the hole is. If you keep going past that, that's where you go through the metal detector, and then there's all the housing units. So we all kind of like walk up to the fence to watch what Mike does. We're all expecting him to turn into the lieutenant's office. And there's a squad of youngsters just ready to take this dude out. Eager to put in the work to get their name and credibility up. You know, guys that had just gotten to the yard that really want to put the work in. So Mike starts walking back to the housing unit, and we're all just watching him. He gets to the lieutenant's office. He turns his head as if he's going to start walking, and he just starts running towards the housing unit. And so one of the 3 guys that's running the yard's like, get him! And you just see these kids just run. They, you know, because you can still move back to the housing unit. So they just run out of the gate of the yard back, like, towards him. They're running towards Mike, and Mike turns around and he sees them, and he just puts his hands up, and he starts kind of like bouncing, getting ready to throw down. And these kids, like, are all just, there's 3 of them coming towards him, and he blips one of them real quick, and then I swear he does a roundhouse kick, hits another one in the face. So he got that dude with his foot so hard with a roundhouse kick, which I'd never even seen someone land a roundhouse kick in real life. It was like the most impressive thing I'd ever seen. He broke this kid's nose. From as far back as we were, we could still see the blood seeping out of this dude's face. So we like, you could tell that his nose was broken, and he'd connected with the other guy. So we already got 2 of them. Now the third guy is just, he looks at him, he's like, oh shit, I'm not as tough anymore without these other 2 guys. And Mike's just standing there, and he's like, what's up? Like, ready to keep going. Already broke this one dude's nose. The other guy's like backing off because he'd already hit him, and the third guy's just a bitch. He won't even fight him at all. And then you just see the guards run from multiple directions and tackle Mike. Mike's just flipping off the yard, and he went out like a straight up gangster. And you know what? That's like one of the cooler things I saw in prison. Like, I can respect that. His integrity was worth more than him being scared or him following what they were, you know. It was like them making a bad call or whatever, and it was a liability. So I don't know, like, he was a liability going around politic and pretending like it's his yard when it wasn't. And I can see both sides of it, but the utmost respect for DC Mike not letting these guys make him check in, go out sideways, and he got to keep up his good name and reputation, and he didn't have to check in. He got shipped off for fighting now. He didn't have to go with his name being, soured because these guys wanted him to go check in. And we will continue the rest of the Federal Prison Chronicles on our next video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit like, comment, share, forget what else, but you know how you always hear people say that at the end of videos. But I do appreciate you guys. Po la